Welcome to episode 2 of RocketPod, the CRM podcast for those looking to beef up their CRM knowledge and grow their business or charity. In the next 2 episodes, we're going to be discussing how to approach a CRM implementation. And Ian and Carl will talk through a 10-step plan that will ensure your CRM project runs nice and smoothly. It's so important to take such a structured approach to CRM implementation as it minimizes risk, because ultimately you need to ensure you get the right CRM software for your needs and it's working for your business, not against it. So today we're taking a good old look at how do you actually plan for CRM implementation. You know, it demands project management skills. It demands knowing exactly what you need and want from a system. And also it's a little bit daunting because at the end of the day, it's tech. Looking at it in its entirety from the beginning, you kind of say, well, where do I even start? So guys, can you help us answer that question? Where do I start with a CRM project?
That's a good question. Like everything else, it's best to have a plan. Okay, so for example, you wouldn't build a house if you're going to put an extension on your house. You wouldn't just get started with a load of bricks and get them delivered and start building your extension. You would have a plan first, and that plan has to be quite detailed sometimes. So when we have a new customer and they want a brand new customer to CRM, we do have some preparation materials we'd like to send them. And in that preparation list, we give them what we call our Rolls-Royce blueprint for putting together the plan for your implementation for your CRM. What was it Winston Churchill said? Failing to plan is planning to fail. Yeah, that's it. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so basically we've got 10 steps. Most CRM implementations, people don't follow all these 10 steps, and you don't have to. But if you want the full Rolls-Royce thing, all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, I'm glad that got that the right way around, then if you follow these 10 steps, you're going to be a long way on the path of success before you've even started.
So this is like a practical framework, if you like, Ian.
Absolutely, yeah, it is. And so we'll go through them one by one, and then at the end we'll do a summary and relist them all again. Do you want to hit us with the first one, Carl?
So the first one, surprisingly, is not contact a partner or a supplier. The first one is to identify your processes that are in scope, which is often the one that's missed by a lot of people. You don't look at the software first. You need to identify what you want the solution to fix or to provide. What do you want it to do for you? So are you are you running your e-marketing campaigns through it? Are you doing lead generation through it? Are you managing your sales process? Are you trying to manage customer service through it? Is it to manage memberships? Is it to manage donations? Whatever the answer is to that, it's about understanding within the organization and defining what it is that you actually want to achieve with the system. There's no point looking at software until you've identified that.
So would it be a good idea then to say, right, I want to do a CRM that covers customer service, and I want to do sales, and I want to do memberships and donation membership, donation management. But I've also got some people go out in the field. So should I plan to put all those into CRM? That's quite overwhelming, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's way too overwhelming. I would always start with what's your core problem you want to solve. What you want to try and do is look at what is the least amount of work that's going to give us the most amount of benefit. And that's how I would start planning on what processes you want to build in. The other important thing to remember is it's not a one-time deal. The solution evolves with you. So just because you don't necessarily build everything in on day one doesn't mean you can't implement second, third, fourth, fifth phases with the new features and functionalities to support other teams.
So, I mean, what we often recommend is if somebody wants to do marketing and they want to do sales and they want to do customer service and memberships, all those things, we would usually recommend that they start with one process or one or two processes or functional areas. So don't try and do everything in one hit, because the big bang, as they call it, often fails because there's just too many moving parts, too many things to think about, too many people involved. If you can often focus on just one process or one functional area and get that really, really well done, nail that one as a CRM, then, as Carl said, it's not a one-time hit. You can then start to build on that. So your application can then, as the sort of phase 2 or as the next step, you can then add in the marketing, which sort of complements the sales. So it used to be that CRM was predominantly just for sales team. That used to be the domain that CRM, when it first came out, sat in. But often now, the salesperson is one of the last people to it. But the way that people buy now is very, very different. So CRM used to be a sales tool, but now it covers like the whole organization. So start simply with one functional area, one department or one process, and then start to build it from there. So, okay, let's move on to the second step then. So, second step being, what are the aims of your project? What do you want to achieve? So, if you've already got a CRM, maybe you just want a new CRM so you can do a like-for-like change. Or it might be sort of a completely new system. So you might want to improve your systems. You might have systems that have been working for a while. They're not great. You've got some obvious pain points. You want to improve those systems. So the second point is, what are the aims of this project? So if we're doing a CRM for the salespeople, what does good look like? So if you imagine that the finished result working absolutely perfectly, how does that look? So what experience is the customer getting, for example? How does it feel for the team that are actually using the CRM? How's this area, like the sales area, going to improve by using a CRM system as well? So this is a great opportunity for setting goals for the project.
So here's the question, Ian. For some people listening, they might be completely new to the world of CRM and they might not actually know what the possibilities are at this stage. They've just got a general idea that they need to improve their sales operations. They need to be a little bit slicker. They have an idea that they've heard that CRM can improve productivity, but don't actually know what that means in terms of output.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important, I think, to set what they call SMART goals, measurable goals. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Carl.
Yeah, so effectively SMART goals are just specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely goals.
Oh, you remembered it. Well done.
I did, yeah. It's been drummed into us for years, Ian, so it's still here. It doesn't go anywhere. Essentially, if you need to create measurables so that you can say, well, before we do anything, this is what we want to achieve. Whether it's improve the sales process, like conversion rates from 50% to 70%, or the speed of which you're converting, reducing the number of service level agreement breaches on your case management from 5 a month to 2 a month. Whatever those goals are, they need to be measurable, because what you would do is look back once the project's implemented, you look back at those goals to see whether it's been successful or not.
Yeah, otherwise you just don't know, do you? If you've succeeded, how it feels all right. It feels like we've kind of succeeded. We're not 100% sure. But if we benchmarked it at the beginning, we say, look, currently this process takes 37 clicks and we have to do it in 3 different applications and it takes this amount of time. 2 teams have to create a new client record, one over here. You know, if we can then say, right, we want to do it in 50% less clicks in one application, we'll know because we've set criteria for that goal. Does that make sense, Natalie?
Yeah, that does. But my point was going to be that in the early stages, some of the businesses may not even know whether or not that goal that they've set, the measurable goal they've set, is even attainable. And they may feel like, oh, even if we implement the software, is reducing that number of steps actually feasible? Can it be done? And what if we don't achieve it? What does that mean? So, I mean, would you say that that's where it's helpful to have like a CRM expert to help them kind of identify what's realistic in those goals?
I would say that you know your own business best. Every customer knows their own organization and their business best. Absolutely, having an expert on hand will help. If you want to pull in an expert at that stage, that's fine. If you've got the budget for that. But everybody who runs a small business or works in a small business, they know what their pain points are. They know what they want to improve. Really, they probably are in a better position to be able to say, you know, we can do this, or we want to do this in 50% less time than it takes currently. Does that make sense? So yeah, setting goals, it's like super important. Be amazed how many people don't do it. So let's look at point number 3. Let's look at, unless anybody wanted to say anything more about goals.
Just as another reason to set goals is the fact that when you're in the midst of the delivery of a project, they can often be forgotten. Especially in a longer rollout, what it does is, as Ian mentioned before, it focuses the mind. You know, being able to having those goals up or publicly available, whether that's on a screen somewhere or something. So you're constantly reminded of what those goals are all the way through. So all your decisions that you make during the project are aimed to try and meet those goals. It just keeps it all focused.
Yeah, it does, Carl, but also I guess that's an additional benefit would be kind of keeping the team on board, keeping them engaged with the project. I guess kind of one of the critical points we'll probably cover later is the kind of the team buy-in. So if you can do that right at the beginning and you're winning them over, then it's going to make the whole project a lot easier later down the line.
Yeah. Well, I guess that kind of links in a little bit as well, because you can say to a team, hey, one of our goals is to make your life easier, right?
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to reduce the amount of time it takes you to do this from 1 hour to 30 minutes or whatever, so you can do twice as much now.
Yeah, so Sharon doesn't have to be pulling her hair out from the amount of admin that she continuously gets flooded with, because we'll streamline and automate half of that for her. Martin or Jill or...
But what Carl said is absolutely right. Yeah, having those goals written down on a rock somewhere, so that you don't get distracted later on when you see all the bells and whistles, that you go, oh, that's a nice to have, that kind of thing. So we've looked at the first step was like, what functional area, what processes. Let's keep it simple. Let's start with one or two, and then we can start to build out. So what's the prioritized, list of areas? Where do we want to address first? So that was the first part. The second part was, okay, now we've identified the area. What are the goals that we want to set for that area? So where do you want to go next? What do you think would be the next thing?
Well, your next thing is to build your team, your CRM team. So this is the internal team with you for your implementation. This isn't necessarily the team with the customers from the supplier side, excuse me.
But what if I'm an organization, there's only me and one other person?
Then you can both be on the team.
That's right. It doesn't have to be a big team, does it?
No.
You
could be one, could be two. Yeah. And they don't have to be individual users for each of the roles. It's just about understanding who needs to do what roles. For example, who's the project sponsor? Who's effectively the person that's responsible for this particular project and the budgets associated to the project.
So I guess that needs to be somebody fairly high up in the organization, or with the sense of, able to pull strings and make things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So generally it's, or typically it's someone on the board, or if it's a owner managed business, it'll be the owner. There's lots of different people, but generally it's someone who is a key senior decision maker within the organization.
For a charity, it might be the board as well, mightn't it?
Yeah.
So if you're going to try and implement CRM in an organization of any kind, it's super important that you've got somebody on side that is in a senior position, isn't it?
Yeah.
The amount of times we've seen people trying to implement something, but that unfortunately that person is sort of in one departmental area and they're trying to get other people to do it, but that person doesn't really have a lot of influence or say over other people, and it becomes a real challenge to get that adopted throughout the organization. Whereas if you've got maybe a board director who says, yes, this is going to be implemented, everybody's going to use the CRM. In fact, we're going to maybe implement some stuff like incorporating KPIs that include CRM and things like that, then you've got a lot better chance. So that's the first person in your team, your executive sponsor. Who's the next person?
Well, just one other point on the executive sponsor, just before we move on, is they need to be passionate. You can't have someone who's not necessarily keen on or doesn't really see the benefits of implementing the system. They have to be the drivers of the change. So that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got to be interested, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They've got to show an interest. We've seen a number of projects in past lives where executive sponsors aren't really interested, and that sort of feeling permeates the team, and it's a very dangerous place to be.
Okay, so we've got an executive sponsor. We've got somebody who makes decisions at the end of the day. What's our next role in that CRM team?
More than likely, you're going to need a project manager. So this is somebody who's effectively your champion, the person who's going to be responsible for keeping the team on track, organizing internal resources, making sure that the right people are at the right meetings, making sure that deadlines internally are met. It's the main point of contact for your CRM partner and any other sort of external resources that you have. Yeah.
So it's the person who's actually doing all the kind of donkey work, making sure that people who say they're going to do things on time, make sure that those people do those things on time. Putting together resources, as you say, just making things happen, reporting to the executive sponsor. Now, again, going back to that, where you've got maybe only two people in the organization, that might be the same person doing both roles, executive sponsor and project manager. Because a lot of the time, especially the SMB sector or charity sector, you don't have loads of people sitting around waiting for a project to come along. Everybody's got day jobs. So when we say you need a project manager, we're not saying that this needs to be somebody's full-time job. This is their role within this project, isn't it?
They will need time, though. They can't assume necessarily that that's a 10-minute a week role. It needs commitment.
Yeah, it's an investment of time. Somebody who's got a day job, that's fine, can be a day job, but you will need to allocate some time during each day or depending on the project or during your week to make sure your project management activities for that CRM project are done, to make sure everything is running on schedule. Okay, cool.
on that project management, in your experience, what job role would that normally be? Or is it a mixture? And would they necessarily need CRM experience previously?
Someone who's organized. I don't think it really matters about job role. I think it's about organization.
Yeah.
They need to be an organized person, and they need to have some control within the organization to ask for certain resources at certain times, or ask people to complete certain activities by certain dates. If they've got no say within that business in terms of those employees and asking them to complete certain things, then there may be a problem there that needs to be addressed.
So they have to have some level of influence and also be one of those doers that just gets things done, makes it happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're working on a project with a customer. It's just so much nicer if we know that we can get hold of that person and that they will make things happen. So if we say to them, we need somebody to be on a meeting for this or that or the other, it's nice if we know that we've got an organised person at the other end who can make things happen. So some of the other users that we might need on that team, or some of the other roles, especially when you are putting in a CRM project, which can be a little bit technical, and not everybody wants to get involved in technical stuff. It's good to have what they call a CRM super user or a system administrator on the customer site, right?
Yeah, that's right. So this is effectively the person who is going to become the CRM expert in-house once the system is live. Ideally, if they've got CRM experience, great, but they don't have to have CRM experience. Just understanding sort of how that sits, they're effectively will be tasked with sort of translating some of the requirements once you've gone live to the various partners and sort of understanding what can and can't be done within the system.
Yeah, and they'll also probably end up being, as I say, the super user within the organization. So they'll be the person that everybody goes to if there's a problem. The first person they go to will be the super user. Depending on the size of the organization, you might have more than one. But usually they don't necessarily have to have CRM experience, as you said, Carl. But we would usually expect that person would be quite familiar with IT systems, as it were, and know their way around IT systems and be fairly familiar with, or au fait with, some database terms like tables and rows and fields and things like this.
Yeah, generally we would train them up on the product as well. So as you said, there's no need for them to necessarily have 100% of knowledge of the product at this stage.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, more often than not, is it that the project manager the project manager may also be the CRM super user?
Yeah.
So that's it. Because that's so close to the project anyway, it would kind of make sense, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. If they've got that kind of time that allows them to do that, then absolutely, yeah. The other thing we're going to need as well, so we've got an executive sponsor role, we've got a project manager role, we've got a CRM super user role. The other area that we might need some people is, or we will need some people, is the business process owners or subject matter experts. So like within the organization, there's people who have expert knowledge of your current systems and your processes. And some of these people might actually have designed and built what you're using currently. So others who may not have developed the system, but they use it on a daily basis. So these are the people that we need to tap for information. They'll know what are the pain points. They'll know what needs improving.
Yeah, absolutely. And extremely important when it comes to things like testing later down the line as well.
Because they'll know if something's easier or not. They're the first ones that will tell you, hang on a minute, this is a lot longer than what we were hoping for.
These guys then, really, they're massively involved in point 2, in knowing what you want to achieve. Because until you speak to your people and know what those pain points are, as you said, Ian, you can't really start to create those SMART goals. Yeah,
if you want a successful user adoption, these are the people you need to please. And then anybody else we might want on that team?
Well, end users, and potentially even a customer representative.
Okay.
So an example, an example of that might be, if you need to have sorry to get slightly techie, but if you need to have a portal, you need some sort of, and you're trying to provide the client or the customer with more information outside of your system.
You mean a portal where a customer logs in and they can see their tickets, for example, or their data, their profile?
Correct, yeah. So someone who represents the customer, i.e. the person who's going to experience logging into the portal, what does it look like? What data do I need access? Is very important if that's one of the key requirements.
Absolutely. And you also mentioned end users there. So we talked about the subject matter experts. That typically might be like a team leader or a manager of a process, but the actual people, the end users as well, You want to keep those happy. You want to keep those guys happy. So as you mentioned in testing, it's important to get them involved, get them happy, listen to what they're saying, listen to their gripes. There's nothing worse than a system that's been designed without end users in mind. That's one of the things that we always wanted to base Rocket CRM on, making sure that users are consulted and that we build systems with users in mind so that the user experience, is a simple one for them.
So it's an intuitive system for them as well. And would you say, Ian, that you get them involved early as possible? Whereabouts in the project would you get them involved? Because obviously you don't want to get to the point where you're in testing and then suddenly the end users go, well, this isn't quite right. When you've already done the build and it's literally coming to the final stages. Where in the project would you say get the end users involved? Early
as possible. When we're working with a client, typically we'll go through either, it depends how big the project is, whether it's 1 day or 2 or 3 days of scoping out the requirements. We would want to get end users involved in that. So we want to know what are their pains, because often they all know stuff that the managers don't know, the team leaders don't know, because the team leaders have different priorities and different focus. And so it's happened time and time again. You see a CRM implementation, and once it's implemented, you'll find an end user who'll say, oh, what about this thing here? How do we do that now? And it turns out that nobody's ever thought about that, because this was the only person that was actually currently doing that, or had been doing it for years and years and years. Yeah, so it's super important to get them involved.
This is really granular detail, isn't it, Ian?
You mean to get them involved in very granular detail?
Just the amount of information that you're actually collating quite early on. You're gathering a lot of kind of qualitative information from a broad number of people across your organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely good to get those. I mean, often we'll be involved at this stage, but if we're not, it's definitely good to get those guys involved at the very beginning. So yeah, it's like anything in life. The more planning you do, the more you're going to be ready. So the planning will give you, make you prepared, but it'll give you confidence and that you're getting it right as well. Okay, we've got our team together. Okay, so we've got somebody who can make decisions. We've got a project manager. We've got our super user who's going to be kind of somebody who's used to systems. So we've got our super users. We've got our subject matter experts, or our team leaders, as it were, and they'll often be CRM champions. And we've got our end users, and maybe even a customer representative or a client representative. So that's quite a few roles, but it can be filled with just a few people. Okay, so that's our CRM team. If we move to step 4, so talk to us about step 4, Kyle. What do we got for step 4?
Well, we've got to map out your processes. So both your as-is and to-be. So what that means is where your process is currently, what you're currently doing, and what you want it to be like in the future. Mm-hmm. Now, they could be the same. They could be one and the same. You could say generally that the processes need to be the same. You're not changing processes. You just need a system to help support that better. Or it could be that you're looking at making efficiencies in the process as part of the rollout of your new CRM system, mm-hmm. which is typically what most people do. So if you used an example of, say, a membership process, so a new member process as a rough example, you can break that down into sort of some high-level steps. So that might be someone expresses an interest in becoming a member. We send them an application or send them a form to fill in this application. They complete it and then send it back. So the application is received by us. We then process the application, the membership is then created, and then we send all the certificates and any other communication around becoming a new member.
So it's just a question of then breaking down all the steps of like a customer journey, I guess, and listing out what are all those steps that are taken, whether it's by the customer or for the customer or by us or whatever. So I guess something like Visio helps out with that, right? If you've got Microsoft Visio, you could do a diagram that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Visio is an easy one to do. I mean, there's other tools like Visio, but we use Visio ourselves. I mean,
what each is of those Visio, guys? I'm not familiar with it.
It's just a designer tool.
Microsoft Visio. So it's I think it's part of Microsoft Office Suite, but it's a tool that you can just drag components onto a canvas and you can put arrows between them and sort of show processes. You can put in the boxes, you can type things in the boxes, say, membership application is received by the membership team, and then there's an arrow pointed to the next box, which might mean it might be processed, the membership is processed and sent somewhere else. So it's a tool that helps you do that. And it's been around for years and years and years, but there are, as Carl said, there's other tools.
I've got you. It's a simple visualization tool then basically for project management. Is that what it is?
Exactly. Yeah, I think you summed it up a lot more easily. Yeah.
Cool. Well, now I know.
So once you've captured the as is, you can look at it. So this is what you currently do. Essentially, you can look at that and decide if you want to change anything. Depending on the size of your project, you might have dedicated people to come in and capture your processes, or it just might be captured internally by the subject matter experts. So it depends on the size of the project and that kind of thing. Typically, for a smaller project, it would just be the SMEs that might capture that. It's about once you've captured it in a graphical form, i.e. using Visio or something like that, you can look at that and sort of identify whether there's any changes that you need to make. That does take time to do, and not everyone really, really wants to do this before they get into the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of getting a CRM, but it is very important. Because
you know
need
what?
to understand.
That's important anyway, even if you're having a CRM implemented or not, really, isn't it? If you think about it, you want to break down what are all the things that we do in our organization, what are all the processes, and you break that down into steps. You can identify like risk areas, pain points, all sorts of things, even if you're not having a CRM implemented. So to me, it sounds like a good exercise to do regardless.
Yeah, exactly. And what you can find, there's something to bear in mind, and we've often seen it, is people will have these processes defined, but they would have been defined 5 or 10 years ago. Yeah. And then as you're going through these processes, people start picking up, we don't do that anymore, or this is slightly changed, or this is different. So it's important to, even if you've got these things already documented within the organization, pull them out and review it, have a look and make sure that they're actually up to date. And if they're not up to date and they're not valid, then create new ones that show the current as is.
Okay, cool. So just quick recap. So we're thinking about a new CRM system. You can see already there's a fair bit of work. Now, as we said, not every implementation includes all these steps because people just don't have the time. But what we're telling you about here today, folks, is the Rolls-Royce kind of method, as it were. You're like thinking about everything. So first thing, identifying your processes or your functional areas. Secondly, what are the aims or the goals for those particular areas? Thirdly, let's build a team, a CRM team that can work together to get that internally to make this thing a success and celebrate those successes together as well. And then once you've got the team, you're going to think about, okay, let's have a look at the processes within that functional area. Or if we've chosen a particular process like memberships, as Carl mentioned, let's break that down into its different components and let's see what that visually looks like, that thing. And let's identify those pain points and risk areas or areas that are bottlenecks, perhaps, that kind of thing. So now we're going to go and do a CRM implementation. So we're going to move from what we're doing now to using this new system. So we may be going from already have a CRM, but we're not happy. We want to move away from that, or we may not. It may just be all be in spreadsheets, all of our data. So we might need to plan for moving some of that data into the new system, right?
Yeah. So the first point there is to think about your data, and we don't just mean the data in your existing central system. Think about all your data. So there may be a need to do some investigation as to where data is held. Is there data in that process held in different spreadsheets? Is there multiple databases? Do people store stuff in Word documents on their desktops? Where is that data? What is it you need to capture to put into the system? Again, not all projects need a data migration because it can add cost to your implementation.
It's usually one of the chunkier areas of cost as well, isn't it, data migration? Because it's just such a timely, takes a lot of time.
It takes a lot of time, and a lot of people underestimate the time that's actually needed, both from their side and from the partner's side, to actually bring the data in. But it's more important for you to understand where your data is, what is the data that you need to bring into your new system before you even start looking at products and things like that.
And if you're going to do a data migration, we call it data migration, basically migrating data from one place to another. You can call it data imports as well. It's got to be done well, because a bad data migration, it just causes more headaches than you even probably started with. So it has to be planned. We've done so many of these, haven't we, over the years? Thousands.
Yeah, I think one of the key things as part of that planning and an example of a bad data migration would be things like importing duplicates into your system. That would be an example of a bad data migration. There's no cleansing of data while you go from your old system to your new.
So if you've got like multiple copies of Jim Smith all over the place, especially if you've got them in different systems, right? And they're not talking to each other.
Systems, yeah. So if you've got 5 versions of Jim Smith because he engages with multiple departments, there has to be an exercise of collating that into one record for Jim Smith. What you'll likely find is that 5 different Jim Smiths might have 5 different sets of details, whether that's addressed, contact details, whatever that is, because over time the data degrades. People don't always update everything.
That's a chunky job to update all that, isn't it?
It's a very chunky job.
That's not easy. So it shouldn't be underestimated, really, because I think in my experience, this is often one of the areas that is underestimated by people. They say, "Oh yeah, I've got everybody on a spreadsheet. We'll just give it to you. You can put that in the system." Oh, and then so's got a spreadsheet as well, and then and there's the data from here, and they don't realise that you've got 3 different copies of the same person, all the different phone numbers, different addresses. How do we know which one is which? Now, if you want your CRM partner to work with you to do that, it's possible, but it's very time consuming. So it's going to cost a lot of money because you're using the time of the CRM partner. If you can do anything like some kind of data cleansing internally before you hand over that data to the CRM partner, you're going to save, basically, your data better anyway. So you're in a better position to be able to do that than the partner, but you're going to save yourself some money as well by doing that.
Yeah, I mean, a core question you need to ask is, do you need it? That's
true.
One of the questions you need to ask. 20 years worth of historical data. Do you need 20 years worth of historical data in your new system? Can you get away with 3 years, 5 years, 18 months, whatever that period is? The less data you bring in, the more chance you've got to check that data and review and confirm that it's working and that it's come over correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And often the data from an old system is unlikely that it's going to be in a state that you can just lift it and shift it straight into the other CRM and the new CRM system anyway. So what I'm saying is things like
emails. Yeah,
emails. Yeah, go on. Emails is a perfect example.
Yeah, systems store them differently. Some people store them as attachments that sit in a folder. Some systems store them directly in text fields. They store them in a number of different ways. How you've got to get that data out, how the data's got to be pushed into the new system.
So sometimes you have to apply logic, don't you?
You have to apply logic, and there's generally, almost always, there's a compromise in something in terms of bringing the data over. So something like you might get 98% of it perfect, but there might be 2% that can't come over in a perfect way because of complications translating it or transforming it from what it's like in the source to the destination. So it's understanding those different complications. And one of the ways that you'd identify that is by doing a trial migration. So one of the things you shouldn't do is just push your data straight into your live and without necessarily doing a trial.
What's a trial migration?
A trial is basically a full run of a migration from your source data into your new system where you don't necessarily go live with it. The idea is that you push it in so that you can review it internally. It allows the users to go through the data in a sandbox environment. So sandbox environment is like a test system, and it's used to review it. So you can thoroughly check the data and review it. Ask any questions about why has this come over like that? Why is this like that? Etc. Well in advance of your live system, because once you go live, you've got a situation where users are new to a system, so they don't quite know where they're clicking yet. They're still learning their way around it, as well as having to deal with data issues. So you want to remove the data issues well in advance of that becoming a problem.
I guess it's all about proper planning, isn't it, as well?
It's proper planning.
This trial migration is part of proper planning for a go live, as it were. I remember back in the day, in a former life, lots of CRM projects where it would literally be a one-time only thing. Here's all our data spreadsheets. Try your best to get them in, and then on go live day, it was just an unholy mess of people not finding stuff. 18 copies of the same person because they've all come from different spreadsheets. So this trial migration de-risks your go live, right? It just takes away some of that horrible fear of failure. It helps you to be confident for your go live. It adds a little bit of expense to have a trial migration, of course, but if you do a cost versus benefit exercise, you'll see that it's going to save a lot in the long run. It's like an insurance. And it also means if you've done a trial migration, then the actual migration on go live or just before go live doesn't need to necessarily cost as much money because all of the jobs, the routines or the logic and all those things are already built for the trial migration. So they might have been tweaked slightly after the trial migration once all the data's been tested and checked that everything's there and it's all in the right place and the users are happy, because this is another really great use for a trial migration is you can use it for the users to do things like user testing and to practice, as it were.
One of the other benefits of a trial migration, what you often find, especially if data is in multiple sources, is that the trial migration will actually be the first time that you actually see all the data from all these different sources in one place. And that's the first time a lot of people realize the quality of the data they have. That's very important to do. And you don't have to be limited to one trial migration. Often if there's a very complex migration, multiple large systems, complicated transforming of the data, you would have maybe two, plus possibly a dry run just before you go live to try and test the whole thing again. There's a lot of different ways you can spin it, but typically there's at least one.
Yeah. Guys, I must say that this part of the project is getting into the realms of quite complex and quite techy. So if I'm a business owner or I've been asked to be involved in a CRM project, I would probably need quite a lot of hand-holding at this point. Me personally, and I think many people out there listening, this will all be very new to them. So I'm guessing you are very much involved at this point with clients on projects. You're right there by their side, taking them every step of the way, because if this is totally new to them, this is like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's tech overload, isn't it?
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do handhold all the way through. So this is an explanation basically of what we will do with you. We give very clear, explanations throughout the whole process. So the customer doesn't need to do the migration, as it were. We will guide the customer on what they need to do in order to get their data ready to cleanse it. We will give them very clear instructions. Then we'll take the data and we'll do these migrations, and then we'll come back and we'll review it with the customer as well. So there's a joint process going on all the way. That's one of the things that we try and always emphasize with our projects, that we always work with the customer and don't kind of leave them on their own. So that's quite a chunky area, that data migration, isn't it?
I mean, one thing I would say on that, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed around a data migration, the most important thing you can do is just identify where your data is. That's the starting point to anything.
Yeah.
The rest of the process, we can guide you through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like we've just sort of touched the tip of the iceberg. I understand that. I think we have got another episode later on where we will delve a little bit further in, because I feel like there's a lot more that could be said on that area in data in general, data management and data migration.
There is definitely. There's a lot
there.
That concludes part 1 of CRM implementation. As a 10-step plan, it's a pretty meaty topic to cover, hence we've spread it across 2 episodes. This has been the RocketPod podcast, delivered by Rocket CRM, the place for spot-on CRM advice delivered in a simple-to-understand format, as Rocket CRM makes CRM simple. The show was produced by the team at Rocket CRM and Thumbs Up Marketing, with special thanks to Alex Tilbrook, Design and Illustration, and MD Hammond. For information on Rocket CRM, visit rocketcrm.co.uk, and you can also follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Twitter's @RocketCRM UK and LinkedIn @Rocket-CRM. Thanks for listening.